I'm Dr. Christy, and this is Climbing Fish Parenting, practical parenting strategies in 20 minutes or less. I'm a psychologist and behavior analyst, and I work with exhausted, overwhelmed parents who feel like they've tried everything and nothing works. If you're listening to this while folding the laundry, hiding in your car, or wishing bedtime would just end already, you're in the right place. Today's topic is grief and the holidays. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what grief looks like in kids at every age, why talking about your loved ones matters more than protecting your kids from sadness, and how to manage your own grief while still showing up for your family. If this is your first holiday season without someone you love, or your 20th, but it's hitting you harder than you expected, this one's for you. Ready to transform your parenting journey? Let's dive in. I'm going to start today by sharing something personal. 3 weeks ago, the night before Thanksgiving, my brother passed away unexpectedly. This will be my first holiday season without him. And a few years ago, my mom died while my family was on this grand adventure, traveling across the country visiting national parks in our RV. My mom was the person who made every Christmas magical. She was the best party host. She crafted special desserts like her famous bûche de Noël. Every room looked like it had been decorated by elves straight from the North Pole. And her specialty was coming up with traditions, not just for herself, but for everyone else. She created a tradition of my dad and me making gingerbread cookies together every year. That's something I still do with my own kids, who never got to meet their grandfather. I'm telling you this because I need you to know I'm not giving you theoretical advice about grief. I'm in this with you right now, today. My own grief is so fresh, I can barely breathe sometimes. And what I've learned, both professionally and from living through multiple losses, is that how we handle grief in front of our kids matters more than we think. So if you're missing someone who made the holidays special, or if you're overwhelmed because you're the one in charge of all those details now, and you find yourself crying in the middle of Michael's while looking at ribbons, or snapping at your family, or just wanting to lay down, I see you. It's okay. And your kids are going to be okay too. Here's what I need you to know. Grief doesn't follow a timeline. You might think that the first holiday without your loved one will be the hardest, and then it'll get easier. But that's not how it works. Sometimes it's the 5th Christmas that destroys you. Sometimes it's the 20th. Grief sneaks up when you least expect it. When you're wrapping presents and you remember how they used to fold the corners just so, or when you're setting the table and there's that empty chair, or when your kid does something that would have made your loved one laugh and you reach for your phone to text them before you remember. The holidays amplify everything. All those traditions, all those sensory memories, the smell of pine, the taste of specific foods, the sound of certain songs, they're grief triggers. And when you're already exhausted and overwhelmed as a parent, grief can feel like the thing that's going to break you. But here's what's actually happening. Grief isn't trying to break you. Grief is love with nowhere to go. And during the holidays, when everything is supposed to be about togetherness and joy, that love feels especially heavy because the person you want to share it with isn't there. So here's where most parents get stuck. We think we need to protect our kids from our grief. We think if we cry in front of them, we're burdening them. We think if we talk about the person who died, we'll make our kids sad. So we hide it. We hold it together. We paste on a smile and try to make the holidays normal, even though nothing feels normal. And here's what happens. Our kids know something's wrong. They can feel it, but they don't understand what it is. And they start to think that maybe they're the problem. Maybe they did something wrong. Maybe their feelings are too much, or worse. They learn that when something painful happens, we don't talk about it. We pretend it's not there. And that becomes their model for how to handle hard things for the rest of their life. Here's the truth. Shielding your kids from grief doesn't protect them. It just teaches them that grief is something to be ashamed of. When my mom passed away, we were living in an RV. An RV is not soundproof. There were so many times I needed to go lay down and cry loudly. or talk on the phone about her estate and the funeral arrangements, and my kids heard way more than I wanted them to. In an ideal world, I probably would have had a little less sharing. But you know what my kids learned? They learned that it's okay that mom is crying her eyes out in the other room. My husband reassured them that this was normal and that I'd smile again. And I made sure to still have moments of connection with them. My kids are learning resilience. They're learning that big feelings are part of being human. They're learning that you can be sad and still show up for the people you love. And when my brother died 3 weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving, my kids already had that foundation. They knew it was okay to cry. My husband made space for their feelings because I was too distraught in those first days. They understood all that came next: the shock, the planning for his celebration of life, the heaviness that settles over everything. While it really stinks to have these experiences, I'm glad my kids got to experience grief from the safety of our home and our arms, because grief is part of life. And if they never learn how to navigate it, they'll be completely unprepared when loss inevitably happens to them. So let's talk about what grief actually looks like in kids, because it doesn't look like adult grief. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll miss it. Preschoolers, ages 3 to 5. They don't understand death is permanent. They might ask when grandma is coming back even weeks or months later. They might seem fine one minute and completely fall apart the next. Their grief comes in waves. They'll play happily, then suddenly cry, then go back to playing. This is normal. Don't try to explain death in abstract terms. They can't grasp it yet. Simple, concrete language works best. Grandpa's body stopped working. He can't come back. And then answer their questions as many times as they ask them. Early elementary, ages 6 to 8. They're starting to understand that death is permanent, but they're terrified it might happen to them or to you. You might see increased clinginess, anxiety about separation, or fears about their own death. They might ask very concrete, specific questions about what happens to bodies after death. Answer honestly but simply. They're also starting to understand that death means missing out on future things, and that can hit hard during the holidays. Tweens, ages 9 to 12. They understand death is permanent and universal, and they're starting to feel the weight of that. But they don't know what to do with those big feelings. You might see grief show up as anger, withdrawal, or behavioral regression. They might seem fine at school and fall apart at home. They might refuse to talk about the person who died because it feels too big. Or they might want to talk about them constantly. Both are normal. Their grief might also show up as physical symptoms: stomach aches, headaches, trouble sleeping. Teens, ages 13 to 18. They're grieving like adults, but they don't have adult coping skills yet. They understand the permanence, and they're grappling with existential questions about mortality and meaning. You might see them pull away, seem irritable or angry, or engage in risky behavior as a way to feel something or avoid feeling. They might throw themselves into activities to avoid the pain, or they might shut down completely. And here's the hard part. They need you, but they also need independence. So they're caught between wanting comfort and wanting to handle it on their own. Before we continue, I want to pause and acknowledge something important. This episode focuses on grief when a child loses a grandparent, aunt, uncle, or other extended family member. But I know some of you listening are navigating something far more devastating: the loss of your spouse, your child's other parent, or the unimaginable grief of losing your own child. If that's you, I want you to know I see you. What you're carrying is different. The recommendations I'm giving in this episode are a starting point, but they're not enough for the complexity of what you're facing. Losing a spouse means you're not just grieving. You're suddenly solo parenting while your world has been shattered. Losing a child is a grief that defies description, and there's no roadmap that feels adequate. These losses require specialized support, both for you and for your children. Please, if you're in this situation, reach out to a grief therapist who specializes in childhood bereavement or traumatic loss. You need and deserve support that's tailored to the magnitude of what you're experiencing. It's simply the reality of profound loss. Please don't try to navigate this alone. For our kiddos with neurodivergence, if your child has ADHD, autism, anxiety, or sensory sensitivities, grief gets even more complicated. For kids with ADHD, grief requires emotional regulation, and that's already a struggle for them. They might have intense emotional outbursts that seem disproportionate. They might hyperfocus on the loss and not be able to think about anything else. Or they might seem to completely forget about it because their brain is seeking stimulation and avoiding the pain. Their grief might look like behavioral issues, more impulsivity, more defiance, more emotional dysregulation. For anxious kids, grief triggers every anxiety they have. They become hypervigilant about everyone else's health and safety. They might develop compulsive behaviors or rituals to try to keep everyone else alive. They might catastrophize every small thing because they've learned that bad things really do happen. The holidays amplify this because there's already so much unpredictability and change. For kids on the autism spectrum, they might process grief very differently than neurotypical kids. They might need to understand the concrete, logical aspects of death before they can process the emotional aspects. They might ask questions that seem inappropriate or insensitive because they're trying to make sense of it logically. They might not show obvious signs of sadness, but are grieving deeply in their own way. And changes to holiday routines, which were probably already hard, become even more difficult when layered with grief. For kids with sensory sensitivities, grief can show up as sensory overload. They might become more sensitive to noise, touch, or visual stimulation. Holiday gatherings that were already challenging become completely overwhelming. They might melt down more easily because their nervous system is already flooded with the emotional weight of grief. Your job is to recognize that their grief might not look like typical grief, and that doesn't mean they're not feeling it deeply. Here's what I hear from parents all the time. I don't want to bring up my mom because it'll make my kids sad. Or, we don't talk about grandpa at Christmas anymore because it's too hard. And I get it. I really do. It is hard. It does make everyone sad. But here's what happens when you don't talk about them. Your kids start to wonder if that person mattered. They start to think that when someone dies, we erase them. They learn that sadness is something to avoid at all costs, even if it means pretending someone never existed. And if your child was close to the person who died, they might start to think that their own grief is wrong or too much. They might feel like they can't bring up happy memories because it'll upset you, so they carry their grief alone. Here's the truth. Talking about your loved one doesn't create sadness. The sadness is already there. Talking about them just gives it somewhere to go. And you know what? Sometimes those conversations lead to tears. Sometimes they lead to laughter. Sometimes they lead to both at the same time. All of that is okay. So you set the table at Christmas and you say, "Grandma would have loved this tablecloth. Remember how she always insisted on using the fancy dishes?" You make her famous recipe, and you tell your kids stories about how she used to make it. You pull out the ornament she gave you, and you let yourself cry while you hang it on the tree. You're not making your kids sad. You're showing them that we don't forget the people we love just because they're gone. You're teaching them that grief and joy can exist in the same space. You're giving them permission to remember. So let's get practical. How do you actually talk to kids about death in a way that's honest but not terrifying? For young kids, those preschoolers and early elementary kids, keep it simple and concrete. Don't use euphemisms like passed away or went to sleep or lost them. Those are confusing and can create anxiety. Say, "Grandpa died." That means his body stopped working and he can't come back. Answer their questions directly and briefly. If they ask if it hurt, you can say, "His body stopped working very quickly, so no, it didn't hurt." If they ask if you'll die too, you can say, "Everyone dies eventually, but most people don't die until they're very, very old. I plan to be around for a very long time." For older elementary kids, they can handle more detail, but keep it honest. If they ask how the person died, you can give age-appropriate information without graphic details. You can talk about feelings. "I'm really sad that Grandma died. I miss her a lot. It's okay you're sad too." You can also validate that grief is complicated. You might feel sad one moment and fine the next. That's normal. For teens, they can handle adult conversations, but they still need support. You can be honest about your own grief. I'm really struggling with this. The holidays feel different without him. You can talk about the bigger questions. I don't know why this happened. I wish I had answers. And you can validate the complexity of their feelings. It's okay if you feel angry or guilty or confused. Grief isn't just sadness. Let me give you some frameworks that might help you understand what you and your kids are experiencing. Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. You've probably heard of these: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Here's what I need you to know. These aren't linear. You don't go through them in order and then you're done. You might cycle through them multiple times. You might skip some. You might experience 3 of them in the same afternoon. And your kids might be in a completely different stage than you are. You might be in acceptance while your 10-year-old is in anger. That's okay. Don't expect your grief to match. Kessler, who worked with Kubler-Ross, added a 6th stage, finding meaning. This doesn't mean the death was meant to be or that there's some silver lining. It means that eventually you find ways to honor your loved one's memory and integrate their loss into your life in a way that feels meaningful. For me, that's making gingerbread cookies with my kids the way my dad and I used to. It's telling my kids stories about their grandparents. It's keeping some traditions and creating new ones. You don't have to find meaning right away, but eventually, you might find ways to carry your loved one with you that feel good instead of just painful. The continuing bonds model says you don't have to let go. You can maintain a connection to the person who died in healthy ways. You can talk to them in your mind. You can keep their traditions alive. You can make decisions based on what they would have wanted. This is especially important for kids. They need permission to still love the person who died, to still feel connected to them, to still include them in their life, even though they're gone. Here's the question I get asked most. How do I fall apart and still be there for my kids? And here's the truth. You can't do both at the same time. You need help. If you have a partner, you have to tag team. When you're completely undone, your partner steps in. When they're falling apart, you step in. You take turns being the strong one. If you're a single parent or your partner isn't available, you need to call in your village, a close friend, a family member, a trusted neighbor, someone who can step in when you need to fall apart for a while. You're dealing with your own devastating grief while being the only person holding everything together for your kids. You need people to help with the practical things: cooking, cleaning, school pickup, and you need people to provide emotional support to your kids when you can't. This isn't weakness. This is survival. Call on your friends, your family, your community. Let them show up for you. Because here's what I want you to hear. You don't have to hold it together all the time. Your kids don't need you to be perfect. They just need to know that someone is taking care of them and that you'll come back. When I was deep in grief after my mom died, there were days when my husband handled bedtime because I couldn't. There were days when I cried in my room and my kids knew I was crying, but they also knew Dad was there and everything was okay. And you know what? My kids are fine. They didn't feel abandoned. They didn't feel burdened. They felt loved and safe, even in the middle of our family's grief. So give yourself permission to not be okay sometimes and ask for help when you need it. Resources for your own grief. Local hospice organizations often offer free grief support groups, though availability varies by location. David Kessler has an online grief support program that's excellent for adults navigating loss. Individual grief therapy with a licensed therapist. Faith communities also often have grief ministries or support groups. Let me give you one more practical tool that can really help kids, especially younger ones. Social stories. A social story is a simple story that explains what happened in concrete terms and gives kids strategies for when they're feeling big emotions. It might say something like, "Grandma died. That means her body stopped working and she can't come back. I loved Grandma very much. Grandma loved me too. Even though Grandma is gone, the love doesn't go away. When I miss Grandma, I can look at pictures of her. I can tell Mom or Dad a story about her. I can draw a picture for her, or I can sit quietly and remember her." You can read this story with your child regularly, not just when they're upset, but as a way to process and reflect on what happened. It gives them language for their feelings and concrete strategies they can use when grief hits. You can make these yourself, or you can find templates online specifically for grief. This is especially helpful for kids who are neurodivergent, but honestly, all kids benefit from having a simple, consistent narrative they can return to. Let me give you some practical strategies for navigating the holidays when grief feels overwhelming. Strategy 1. Honor traditions selectively. You don't have to do everything the way you used to. If your loved one always hosted Christmas dinner and the thought of doing it yourself is too much, it's okay to change it. You can go to a restaurant. You can celebrate on a different day. You can skip it entirely this year. Give yourself permission to do what you can handle. Strategy 2. Create new traditions alongside the old ones. I love remembering my parents at the holidays, but being constantly surrounded by things that reminded me of them was overwhelming. So I made some new decorations. I didn't get rid of the things that remind me of my parents, but I was more selective so that every positive moment didn't feel like I was drowning in memories. You can keep the ornaments your loved one gave you and buy new ones. You can make their famous recipe and try a new one. Both things can be true. Strategy 3. Talk about them intentionally. Don't avoid their name. Light a candle in their memory. Set a place at the table with their picture. Share stories about them. Let your kids ask questions. Make space for the sadness and the laughter that comes with remembering. Strategy 4. Lower your expectations. The holidays don't have to be perfect. Your house doesn't have to look like a magazine. Your kids don't have to have 27 presents. You don't have to bake 17 types of cookies. This year, survival might be the goal, and that's okay. Strategy 5. Give yourself permission to feel whatever you feel. If you're at a holiday party and you suddenly need to cry, excuse yourself and cry. If you're decorating the tree and you need to stop halfway through, stop. If you wake up on Christmas morning and you feel genuinely happy for the first time in months, let yourself feel that too. Grief isn't linear. Joy and sadness can coexist. Most grief is normal and healthy, even when it's intense. But there are times when kids need additional support. So I want you to watch for these signs. Extended withdrawal. If your child stops engaging with friends, activities, or family for weeks or months, persistent guilt or self-blame. If your child believes they caused the death or could have prevented it, extreme anger or aggression. If your child becomes violent or destructive in ways that are dangerous, regression that doesn't improve. If your child regresses developmentally and stays there for months, persistent physical symptoms, chronic stomach aches, headaches, and sleep disturbances that don't improve. If your child expresses that they want to die to be with the person who died, this needs immediate professional attention. If you're seeing any of these signs consistently for more than a few weeks, reach out to a therapist who specializes in childhood grief. This doesn't mean your child is broken. It just means they need extra support to process something really hard. And the same goes for you. If your grief is interfering with your ability to function for weeks or months, if you're having thoughts of self-harm, if you can't get out of bed or take care of your kids, please reach out for help. Grief therapy works, and asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Here's what I want you to tell your kids in your own words. It's okay to be sad during the holidays this year. I'm sad too. I miss whatever your loved one's name is so much. But we're going to get through this together. And it's also okay if you feel happy sometimes. That doesn't mean you didn't love them or that you're forgetting them. You can be sad and happy at the same time. That's what grief feels like. We're always going to remember your loved one. We're going to talk about them and share stories about them. When you miss them, you can tell me. When you want to cry, you can cry. And when you want to laugh about a funny memory, we can laugh. All of these feelings are okay. The holidays might feel different this year, and that's okay. We're going to do our best, and some days our best might not be very much, but we're going to take care of each other. That's the message. Simple, honest, and full of permission to feel. All right, that's it for today. Remember, shielding your kids from grief doesn't protect them. It just teaches them that grief is something to be ashamed of. Your kids can handle hard things, especially when they have you to help them through it. The fix? Talk about your loved one. Make space for all the feelings, yours and theirs. Honor traditions selectively, and give yourself permission to create new ones. Lower your expectations and ask for help when you need it. Your kids don't need you to make the holidays perfect. They just need you to be real with them. If this was helpful, hit subscribe so next week's episode shows up automatically. And if you want more strategies for handling the tough parenting moments, head to my website at www.climbingfishparenting.com and sign up for my newsletter. You'll get practical scripts, real-life examples, and strategies you can use right away. That strategy I just gave you? It's the whole climbing fish philosophy in action. There's a quote, "Everybody's a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid." Your kid isn't broken. Your parenting isn't broken. Sometimes we're just asking our fish to climb trees. That's what we fix here. I'm Dr. Christy, and I'll see you next week.